afternoon. This afternoon we're going to be reading the story of Esther for Purim. And so here we go. The story of Esther is the Purim tale. It happened in the days of Ahasuerus, king of Persia, who ruled from India to the Ethiopian highlands. One night, the king held a banquet in his palace in the capital city of Shushan. The noble lords and ladies of Persia all attended, except one. "Where is Vashti?" Ahasuerus asked. He sent a messenger with an order for the queen to come to the banquet at once. The messenger returned without her, saying, "The queen is ill. She refuses to come." "How dare she refuse the king's command?" Ahasuerus shouted. "Vashti is unworthy to be queen. She will be queen no more." The king sent Vashti away in disgrace. Months passed. King Ahasuerus decided to marry again. He summoned all the maidens in the land of Persia to the city of Shushan. One would be chosen to become his new queen. Now, at this time, there was a man named Mordecai living in the city of Shushan. He was a Hebrew descendant from those carried off as captives years ago, when the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar burned the city of Jerusalem and destroyed the holy temple. Mordecai had a niece. Hadassah, the Persian, called her Esther, the morning star, for in her eyes she was as beautiful as the queen of heaven. Mordecai brought Esther to the king's palace. She did not want to go. "What if the king commands me to do something against my religion?" she asked her uncle. "If that happens, you must refuse," Mordecai said. "However, it may not come to that. The Persians do not pray to idols. King Ahasuerus has always allowed us to worship in our own way. Do your best to serve him. He asks about your people and your religion, tell him the truth. But if he does not ask, there is no need to speak of it. Above all, do not be afraid. Trust God to protect you and help you to find favor in the king's eyes." Esther entered the palace. Mordecai waited in the courtyard. He came every day asking those who passed through the gates about Esther and how she fared. One day, while sitting by the gate, he overheard two royal guards talking. They spoke openly about Mordecai. A Hebrew would not know what they were saying. However, Mordecai understood Persian. He listened as the guards plotted to murder the king. Mordecai revealed the plot to the king's officers. The treacherous guards were arrested. The officers thanked Mordecai for saving the king's life. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the maidens prepared themselves to meet the king. Each strove to become more beautiful. They bathed in milk, they perfumed themselves, they dressed in exquisite gowns and put on priceless jewelry. They darkened their eyelids with kohl and reddened their lips. Esther added but a touch of color to her face. Her only jewelry was a pair of gold earrings. She dressed in a simple gown of Egyptian linen. While the other maidens piled their hair into towering structures, Esther combed her hair and tied it with a cord of white wool. The other maidens laughed to see her dressed so simply. But King Ahasuerus did not laugh when Esther came before him. Esther's natural beauty outshone the others, as the full moon outshines the stars and the planets. When the king spoke to her, she answered with such wit that he thought, "She is one in 10,000. I am a fool if I do not make her my next queen." King Ahasuerus announced his choice. Esther became his bride and took Vashti's place as queen of all Persia. Soon after these events, the king's chief minister Haman, the son of Hammedatha, came riding toward the palace gate. His servants cried, "Bow down to Haman! Bow to the living God!" The people in the street rushed to throw themselves on the ground. Only one remained standing, Mordecai, Esther's uncle. Haman's guards tried to force him to his knees, but Mordecai was stronger than they were, and he threw them aside as if they were toys. "Why won't you bow down to me, the king's minister?" Haman asked. "I will gladly bow down to you as the king's minister," Mordecai said, "but I will never bow down to you as God. There is only one God who made heaven and earth. That God alone do I worship." Haman's anger flared. He vowed to take revenge on Mordecai, his family, and his entire people. That evening, Haman whispered to King Ahasuerus, "Are you aware that there are people living in your land who ignore your laws and insult your officers? They call themselves Hebrews, for it is said their ancestors came from the other side of the great river. They cannot be trusted. It is best to get rid of them now, everyone, lest they rise up in time of war and join your enemies." "Do as you think best," King Ahasuerus said, handing Haman his signet ring engraved with the royal seal. Haman wrote out a proclamation and stamped it with the king's own seal. He sent copies to all the governors and officials in every corner of the land, telling them that on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is called Adar, every Hebrew within the walls, gates, and borders was to be killed. Neither the old nor the young were to be spared. The proclamation puzzled the people of Shushan. "Why does the king hate the Hebrews?" they wondered. "They have been living among us for years. They have harmed no one. They are our friends and neighbors." But a proclamation stamped with the king's seal was law. No one could question it. Mordecai tore his clothes. He poured ashes on his head. He dressed in rags and went to sit by the palace gates. Esther's servants noticed him there and informed the queen. She came out to speak with her uncle. Mordecai read Haman's proclamation to her. "You must go to the king. Beg him to spare the lives of our people." "I cannot," Esther said. "No one, not even the queen, may approach the king without permission. I cannot go unless he summons me. It is death to do so." Mordecai answered, "Do you think we will be safe in your palace while your people perish? I believe that God will save us. If not through you, then surely through someone else." "I will do as you ask," said Esther. "Have our people pray for me. I will go to the king, even if it means my death." Esther dressed in her finest robes. With the royal crown on her head, she went to stand silently at the entrance to the king's throne room. The king noticed Esther standing in the doorway. He smiled and pointed his scepter toward her, inviting her to enter. Esther bowed and touched the scepter with her fingertip. "What may I do for you, my queen?" King Ahasuerus said. "Ask, and you will receive it, even if it were half my realm." "I desire only your happiness," Esther replied. "I know the cares of ruling are very heavy. I have arranged a feast to gladden your heart. Please come to my chamber tomorrow night. Bring your minister Haman with you." Haman's pride swelled like never before. He boasted to his wife, "The queen has invited me to a private feast with the king, next to King Ahasuerus. I am the greatest in the land. Yet my joy turns bitter when I see that rascal Mordecai sitting by the palace gates." "Rid yourself of him," Haman's wife urged. "Build a gallows 100 feet high. When you dine with the king tonight, ask permission to hang Mordecai from it." "An excellent idea," said Haman. He ordered his servants to build the gallows. He looked forward to seeing his enemy, Mordecai, swinging high above the roads of Shushan. That night, King Ahasuerus could not sleep. He summoned his scribes to read to him from the royal chronicles. The scribes read how Mordecai the Hebrew warned the king's guards of treachery. "This man saved my life," said King Ahasuerus. "How has he be rewarded?" "No reward was ever given," the scribes said. "This cannot be," said the king. "A man who saves the king's life must be rewarded. Send for my minister Haman." When Haman arrived, King Ahasuerus asked him, "What should be done for the man whom the king wishes to honor?" Haman flushed with pride. He thought the king meant to honor him. "Your Majesty, this man must be dressed in a royal robe with a royal crown on his head. He must be mounted on the finest horse in your stables. Your most important minister should lead him through the city, crying out so all may hear, 'Behold the man who the king wishes to honor.'" "Excellent," King Ahasuerus exclaimed. "Do this for Mordecai, the man who sits at the palace gates. You yourself shall lead him." So Mordecai was dressed in a royal robe. A golden crown was placed upon his head. He was mounted on a white horse from the royal stables. Haman, the king's minister, led him through the streets of Shushan, crying out, "Behold the man whom the king wishes to honor." Haman's hatred for Mordecai and his people knew no bounds. At the same time, when the people of Shushan saw Mordecai raised up and Haman brought low, they began to wonder if Haman might be less powerful than he claimed. Haman and King Ahasuerus attended Esther's banquet the following night. Haman practiced the words he meant to say when the king was merriest. He intended to ask permission to hang Mordecai. But as he started to speak, King Ahasuerus turned to Esther. "My beloved queen, thank you for this fine feast. I have never enjoyed myself as I have tonight. Let me grant you a gift. Ask for whatever you desire." Esther threw herself at the king's feet. Trembling, she grasped the hand and begged, "My lord and husband, spare my life. Spare the lives of my uncle Mordecai and my people. Do not allow our enemies to destroy us." "Who threatens my beloved queen? Who would kill my loyal friend Mordecai?" King Ahasuerus shouted. Esther pointed to Haman. "That man. Haman, your minister." She thrust a copy of Haman's proclamation into his hands. King Ahasuerus read it with growing rage. "How dare you!" he shrieked at Haman. "This proclamation is a forgery. You misused the power I gave you." In terror, Haman clasped Esther's feet. "O Queen of Mercy, spare my life." King Ahasuerus kicked him away. "How dare you touch the queen? Away with this wretch. Hang him from the gallows out there. Hang his whole family with him." And so, to that end, Haman prepared for Mordecai. He had prepared for Mordecai became his own. King Ahasuerus canceled Haman's proclamation, decreeing instead that Mordecai and his people should be honored and protected furthermore from that time forth. The 13th day of Adar would be a celebration for the Hebrews and their neighbors as well. So it is to this day. The 13th day of Adar is a time of joy and merriment. And because Haman threw dice to choose the day of destruction, the holiday is known after the Persian word for dice, pur. And that is why we call it Purim.